Hey everyone, welcome back. If you're listening, chances are you've been looking into Occidental Petroleum.
OXY.
Yeah, OXY, as a potential investment.
And you want to understand
Definitely.
why Warren Buffett keeps buying it,
Exactly. Like, what does he see that maybe the rest of us are missing?
right?
So we're going to dive into this recent article from the Motley Fool.
Okay.
See if we can figure this out.
Sounds good.
And the thing is,
Yeah.
even though Occidental stock has dropped
Uh-huh.
35% since its peak in April,
Wow.
Buffett just bought almost 9 million more shares.
Yeah, that's a head scratcher, isn't it?
It really is.
It's
Like, what is he doing?
What is he seeing?
That we're not.
So according to the Motley Fool, Berkshire Hathaway,
Buffett's company.
Ray Buffett's company,
Yeah.
now owns over 260 million shares.
Of Occidental Petroleum.
Occidental Petroleum, yeah.
Which is
With over 12 billion.
$12 billion.
Oh.
Making it their sixth biggest holding.
That's not just dipping his toes in the water. That's like a full cannonball into the Occidental pool.
It really is.
And what I find even more interesting is that
Yeah.
this isn't a sudden impulse buy.
Right.
Remember back in his 2023 letter to Berkshire Hathaway shareholders?
Uh-huh.
Buffett actually specifically called out Occidental's CEO,
Vicky Hollop.
Vicky Hollop, yeah.
Praising her leadership.
Yes, and her expertise in fracking.
And he said she has this, like, uncommon talent.
He seems very impressed with her,
Yeah.
with how she's managed to make fracking profitable for Occidental.
Which a lot of companies haven't been able to do.
Exactly.
So what's her secret?
Well, the article mentions that Hollop's strategy is basically to focus on drilling in highly profitable locations,
Right.
like the Permian Basin,
Okay.
while also getting rid of assets that aren't performing as well.
So kind of trimming the fat.
Yeah, it's a very shrewd approach to squeezing the most value out of their operations.
Okay, but here's where I'm getting stuck.
Okay.
If everyone is talking about this big shift,
Towards renewable energy?
right, towards renewable energy, moving away from fossil fuels,
Yeah.
why is Buffett,
Yeah.
of all people,
Right.
doubling down on what some might say is a sunset industry?
It does seem a little bit out of character for him, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
Like, is he missing something?
Well, I think the important thing to remember here
Yeah.
is that while the energy sector is definitely going through a major transition,
Uh-huh.
it's not as simple as flipping a switch.
Right.
And suddenly, we're all running on sunshine and wind.
We wish
I know.
it would be nice.
It would. But
The
unfortunately,
reality is the world still relies heavily on oil and gas.
yeah.
And that's not going to change overnight.
And the article actually cites some data
Oh, yeah.
from the U.S. Energy Information Administration
Okay.
showing that
Showing that.
60% of U.S. electricity generation
Wow.
still comes from fossil fuels.
60%, that's a lot.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And a big chunk of that is from natural gas.
Which is often found alongside crude oil.
Right.
So even if we could wave a magic wand
Yeah.
and replace all gas-powered cars with electric vehicles tomorrow,
Yeah.
we would still need
Fossil fuel.
to keep the lights on.
Exactly. We're talking about a massive global infrastructure
Yeah.
that took decades to build.
Yeah.
Replacing it
With a new system.
with a completely new system is going to take time.
a lot of time.
A lot of time.
And even with all this growth,
In renewables.
yeah, they just can't replace fossil fuels
In the short
to medium term.
to medium term, no.
So it seems like Buffett might be onto something here
He might be.
by realizing that oil and gas are going to be around for a while.
At least for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
But what about the rise of electric vehicles?
EVs.
Yeah, EVs.
EVs are definitely a game changer.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to have a huge impact on oil demand in the long run.
Yeah.
But the reality is this transition is happening gradually. Last year, only 1 in 5 cars sold globally
Wow.
was an EV.
Really?
Yeah. And actually, we're seeing that growth rate slow down a little bit.
Oh, why is that?
Well, consumers are facing some challenges, like
Okay.
limited charging infrastructure.
Okay.
It's not like everyone can just plug in their car at home
Yeah.
or easily find a charging station on a road trip
Especially if you're going
long distances.
long distances, yeah.
It can be a challenge.
So it seems like while the shift towards EVs is happening,
Yeah.
it's not going to be this...
Sudden drop off in oil demand.
Right. It's going to be
Like a
more...
gradual decline.
Okay, so that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's why projections for peak oil demand are
Or further out
further out than many people think.
than many people think, yeah.
So Goldman Sachs, for example,
Yeah.
believes that global oil demand will continue to rise until it peaks
When?
in 2035.
Wow. So that's
Almost a decade away.
a decade away.
At around 110 million barrels per day.
And even then, they predict that demand will remain at that high level
For at least...
at least another 5 years.
Wow.
Which is interesting, right?
Yeah, and OPEC.
The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries,
Right.
they're even more bullish
Than Goldman
Sachs.
So they're projecting that peak oil won't happen until
2050.
2050. Wow.
At over 120 million barrels per day.
That's a very different picture
From what some people...
than what some people imagine.
Yeah.
So maybe we've all been kind of underestimating the staying power of oil and gas.
I think that's possible.
Okay, so it sounds like there's still a lot of runway left.
For oil and gas companies.
Especially
those that are well managed and strategically positioned for the future, like Occidental.
Right, but with all this talk about...
reducing carbon emissions,
Yeah.
aren't companies like Occidental going to be left behind?
That's what I'm wondering.
It's a valid question.
Because everyone is setting these...
ambitious targets.
Yeah, for net zero emissions.
Yeah, governments and businesses around the world are all trying to reduce their carbon footprint.
So surely that has to have some impact.
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But here's what's interesting.
Okay.
A lot of these initial plans for going carbon neutral, they're proving to be way too aggressive.
Like they're not realistic.
They're just not realistic.
In the time frames that were initially set.
Exactly.
Yeah, the article mentions some examples.
Oh, like what?
Like airlines, schools,
wow.
even tech giant Alphabet.
Really?
All falling short of their initial net zero milestones.
So it's not just a few isolated cases.
No, it seems like it's pretty widespread.
It does.
And even BP?
A major energy company.
Yeah, they're having trouble meeting their targets.
So even the big players
Are struggling. And it's not just corporations either.
What else?
States.
Okay.
Like New York.
Yeah.
And California.
Which have been kind of leading the charge on climate action. They are finding it really difficult to reach their goals as quickly as they'd hoped.
Huh.
Yeah.
So it seems like this transition to a low-carbon world...
The low-carbon world.
is going to be...
a lot more...
challenging and complex.
Than many people initially anticipated.
Than we all thought.
I think so.
Okay, so if this shift...
towards a carbon-free future...
is happening slower than expected.
Yeah.
Does that mean companies like Occidental are actually in a pretty good position?
It's certainly a possibility.
Okay.
And here's where things get really interesting with Occidental.
Okay.
They're not just sitting back
and waiting
for the energy transition to happen to them. They're not actually taking a very proactive, forward-thinking approach.
Like, what are they doing?
Well, the article talks about how Occidental is investing heavily in carbon capture technology.
Carbon capture, okay.
Which could play a really significant role in reducing emissions.
So they're betting on a future where we can still use fossil fuels, but capture and store the carbon emissions.
Exactly, instead of releasing them into the atmosphere.
Okay, that's pretty interesting.
And this isn't some small side project for them.
Oh, really?
The Motley Fool cites research from Precedence Research that projects the carbon capture industry to grow.
By how much?
At a rate of 22% per year.
Wow.
Between now and 2033.
That's huge.
It is.
So they're potentially profiting.
From both the current energy landscape.
Where oil and gas are still kings.
Yes. And from a future low-carbon world where carbon capture is essential.
So they're really hedging their bets.
They are, which is a pretty smart move.
It is.
In such a volatile and evolving industry.
Yeah, it's like they're playing both sides.
They are.
Okay, so it sounds like Occidental might be a lot more than just your average oil and gas company.
I think so.
They're positioning themselves to be
a major player
in both the traditional energy space and the emerging clean energy space.
Exactly.
But is it actually a good investment?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
It is.
Well, as with any investment, there are definitely some trade-offs to consider.
Like what?
Well, the Motley Fool acknowledges that Occidental's growth might be slower and more uneven compared to other companies, especially in the near term.
But on the other hand, that pullback
in the stock price
could mean that the stock is currently
undervalued.
Yeah.
The article mentions that analysts have a consensus price target of $61.48 for Occidental, which is a full 30% higher than its current price.
So there's potential upside there.
There is.
And then you combine that
with Buffett's continued confidence.
Right. Like even
Just
though
he's
in the company.
He's being really selective.
Yeah, he's being very selective with his investments overall.
Yeah.
It does paint a pretty intriguing picture, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
It's like he's saying, don't underestimate Occidental. Exactly.
So what do you think?
Well, I think every investor needs to do their own research.
Of course.
And consider their individual risk tolerance and investment goals.
Right.
But Occidental certainly seems...
Worth a closer look.
Worth a closer look, especially for those who are interested in a potentially undervalued company.
With a foothold in both traditional energy
and the emerging carbon capture industry.
Yeah, it's a really unique position they're in.
It is a unique position.
Okay, so we've talked about global energy trends.
Yeah.
Buffett's strategy. Occidental's unique position.
Yep.
But at the end of the day,
yeah,
our listeners want to know if this is a stock
they should consider adding to their portfolio.
Right. Well, it's not a risk-free bet. No investment ever is.
Of course.
But there are some compelling arguments in favor of Occidental.
Okay, like what?
Especially if you have a long-term investment horizon.
Like Warren Buffett.
Like Warren Buffett, exactly.
The Motley Fool article points out that Occidental is currently trading at a significant discount to its average analyst price target.
Which suggests there's potential.
For some serious upside.
If the market starts to see.
The value that Buffett seems to see.
Okay.
And don't forget.
What?
This is a company that pays a dividend.
Oh.
So even if the stock price doesn't skyrocket overnight, you're still earning a steady stream of income from your investment.
And that dividend is likely to continue.
Yeah.
Given their strong position.
In the oil and gas market.
Yeah.
And their strategic investments in carbon capture technology.
So they're generating strong cash flow.
They are.
And they're reinvesting some of that cash flow.
Into technology.
That could pay off big time down the road.
Exactly.
Okay, so on one hand, you've got the global push for renewables, which could eventually displace oil and gas.
Right.
But on the other hand,
you've got Occidental.
With a proven track record of profitability.
Yes.
A savvy CEO. A commitment to dividend payments.
Yes.
And a forward-thinking approach.
To the energy transition.
Okay.
And you've got Warren Buffett.
One of the most successful investors of all time.
Putting his money behind Occidental.
That's a pretty powerful endorsement.
It really is.
So what's the takeaway for our listener?
I think the takeaway is this. Occidental Petroleum is a company worth serious consideration.
Okay.
They're not just riding the wave of the current energy market. They're actively shaping their future in a way that could make them a major player.
In the low-carbon economy.
In the low-carbon economy.
And if you're looking for an investment that offers both potential for growth and a steady stream of income,
Occidental might be a good fit.
For your portfolio.
For your portfolio, especially if you're willing to take a long-term view.
Like Warren Buffett.
Like Warren Buffett, exactly.
It's fascinating how this all connects, right?
It is.
On the one hand, you have this undeniable push.
Towards renewable energy.
Right, but on the other hand, the demand for oil and gas isn't going away anytime soon.
It's not. It's like we're in this in-between phase.
This energy limbo.
Yeah. Great.
And it's going to take time to transition.
From one dominant energy source to another.
Exactly. Like, think about those EVs we were talking about.
Yeah.
Even if we could magically snap our fingers and replace every gas guzzler on the road with a shiny new EV.
Yeah.
We'd still run into some major roadblocks.
Oh, absolutely. Like our electricity grids.
Yeah, they probably couldn't handle all those EVs charging at once.
Most of our current electricity infrastructure just isn't built to handle that kind of surge in demand.
Yeah, and even if it could, where would all that electricity come from?
Right, exactly.
If we're still largely relying on fossil fuels to generate electricity, then we're not really solving the emissions problem.
No, it would be like shifting the emissions from our tailpipes to power plants.
We'd just be moving the problem around.
Exactly, not eliminating it.
And then there's the issue of
the raw materials needed to build all those EV batteries.
Right.
The mining and processing of lithium, cobalt, and other essential minerals can have significant environmental and social impacts of their own.
So it's complicated.
It is. It's a complex web of interconnected challenges that we need to think about carefully.
Okay. So it's more nuanced than just swapping out gas stations for charging stations.
There's more nuance.
And that brings me back to Buffett and his big bet on Occidental.
Okay.
Do you think he's being contrarian here?
Contrarian.
Like, is he betting against the clean energy revolution?
I wouldn't say he's betting against it.
Okay.
I think he's being pragmatic.
Okay.
He recognizes that the transition to a truly sustainable energy system is going to take a lot longer.
And be more complicated.
And be a lot more complicated than many people realize.
Right.
And in the meantime, there's still money to be made in oil and gas.
Especially if you're investing in a company like...
a well-managed company.
Occidental.
That's strategically positioned for the future.
So he's not necessarily saying renewables are bad.
No, not at all.
He's just saying that oil and gas still have a role to play.
For the foreseeable future.
For the foreseeable future.
Yes.
And he's also recognizing that Occidental...
under Vicky Holub's leadership... is not just riding the wave of the current energy market.
Right.
But actively shaping their future in a way that could make them a leader.
In both.
In both the present and future energy landscape.
They're really straddling the line there.
They are.
And that's really important, that dual focus.
It is.
It could be incredibly valuable in the long run.
I think so.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different things.
We have.
Global energy trends, Buffett's strategy, Occidental's unique position. But what does it all mean for our listeners?
Right. Let's bring it back down to earth.
Yeah. You want to know if this is a stock you should consider adding to your portfolio?
Well, it's not a risk-free bet.
Right.
No investment ever is.
True.
But there are some compelling arguments in favor of Occidental, especially if you have a long-term investment horizon.
Okay, like Warren Buffett.
Like Warren Buffett.
Right.
Remember, the Motley Fool article points out that Occidental is currently trading at a significant discount to its average analyst price target.
So there's a potential for some serious upside there.
There is, if the market starts to recognize the value that Buffett seems to see.
Okay.
And remember, this is a company that pays a dividend.
Oh, right.
So even if the stock price doesn't skyrocket overnight, you're still earning a steady stream of income from your investment.
Right. Oh.
Yeah, and that dividend is likely to continue.
Given Occidental's strong position.
In the oil and gas market.
And their strategic investments in carbon capture.
Exactly.
Well, okay, so they're making money, investing in the future, and paying dividends.
They are.
But we also talked about how their stock price has dropped since April.
Yeah.
Why is that?
That's a great question, and it's something that any potential investor should consider carefully.
For sure.
The stock market can be fickle. And there are a few factors that might be contributing to Occidental's recent price decline.
Okay, like what?
Well, first, there's the general market sentiment towards oil and gas companies.
Even though the transition to renewables is happening gradually?
Yeah.
There's still a lot of uncertainty about the long-term future of the industry.
There is.
And that can make investors nervous.
It can.
So Occidental gets lumped in.
With other oil and gas companies.
That might not be as well positioned for the future.
Exactly.
And then there's the fact that Occidental took on a lot of debt.
Oh, yeah.
To acquire Anadarko Petroleum back in 2019.
That was a big deal.
It was.
That debt has been weighing on their balance sheet.
So some investors might be concerned?
About their ability to manage it effectively.
So even though they're generating a lot of cash flow, they have a significant debt burden.
They do, but they've been making significant progress in paying down that debt.
Okay, so that's good.
And their strong cash flow gives them the ability to continue reducing their debt levels in the coming years.
So it's a factor, but not a deal breaker.
Exactly.
What else should investors be thinking about when evaluating Occidental?
Well, I think it's important to consider their valuation.
Okay.
Despite the recent stock price decline, Occidental is still trading at a significant discount to its average analyst price target.
So that suggests
that there's potential for the stock to rebound if the market starts to recognize the value
of their fracking expertise, carbon capture strategy, and strong cash flow.
Exactly.
So even though the stock has taken a hit lately, there's still a lot of potential upside.
There is, and remember, Warren Buffett is not known for chasing short-term gains.
He's in it for the long haul.
He is. He's a long-term investor who looks for companies with strong fundamentals and a durable competitive advantage.
And he clearly sees those qualities in Occidental.
He does.
Okay, I'm starting to see why you find this company so fascinating.
They are.
They're not your typical oil and gas company.
No, they're not.
They're doing a lot of innovative things and positioning themselves for success in both the present and the future.
Exactly, and I think that's what makes them such an intriguing investment opportunity.
Yeah, challenging the status quo and redefining what it means to be an energy company.
In the 21st century.
In the 21st century.
And I, for one, am excited to see what they do next.
But before we move on, I want to come back to this idea of risk.
Risk, okay.
We talked about the general market sentiment towards oil and gas companies. And Occidental's debt burden.
Right.
Are there any other risks that our listeners should be aware of?
Absolutely. There are always risks associated with any investment.
Right.
And Occidental is no exception.
Okay, so what are they?
Well, one risk to consider is the volatility of oil and gas prices.
Okay.
Their profits are directly tied to the price of these commodities.
Right.
And those prices can fluctuate wildly.
Based on?
Based on global supply and demand dynamics, geopolitical events, and even weather patterns.
So many things.
A lot of facts.
So even if Occidental is doing everything right operationally, their profitability could still be impacted by factors outside of their control.
That's right. Another risk to consider is the pace of the energy transition.
Even though we talked about how that transition is happening more gradually?
It's still possible that governments could implement policies that accelerate the shift away from fossil fuels.
What kind of policies are we talking about?
Well, we're already seeing some governments implement carbon taxes and cap-and-trade programs.
Okay.
These policies are designed to make it more expensive to emit carbon dioxide, which could impact the profitability of Occidental's oil and gas operations.
So even though they're investing in carbon capture, their core business could still be negatively impacted by these policies.
It's a possibility, and then there's the risk that carbon capture technology doesn't pan out as expected.
Right, because it's still a relatively new technology.
It is.
And there are a lot of unknowns.
About its scalability, its cost effectiveness, and its long-term viability.
So it's a big bet on a technology that might not deliver.
It is a big bet.
But they're being strategic about their investments.
They are.
And working with governments.
To ensure that their projects are aligned with emerging carbon policies.
So they're doing their best to mitigate the risks.
Yeah.
But they're still there.
They are still there.
Okay, so definitely risks to consider.
Yes.
But also a lot of potential upside.
It's like any investment. You have to weigh the risks and rewards and decide if it's right for you.
That's true.
And that's why it's so important to do your own research.
Really dig in.
Really dig into Occidental's financials.
Yeah.
Understand their strategy and assess their risk profile.
Before making any decisions.
Exactly.
Great note to end on.
I think so.
We've covered a lot here, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg.
It is. There's always more to learn.
You know, it's funny. As we've been talking about Occidental,
yeah.
I keep thinking about how they're kind of
a contrarian play.
Yeah, like
swimming against the current a little bit.
While everyone else is rushing into renewables,
right?
They're being more
measured,
strategic.
Yeah, they're not ignoring the energy transition,
right?
But they're also recognizing that
it's going to be a long
and complex process.
Exactly.
And they're setting themselves up to profit from
both
the current energy landscape
and the future low carbon world.
It's like they're playing the long game.
They are.
While everyone else is focused on the short-term gains.
It's a fascinating approach.
It is.
It really sets them apart from a lot of other energy companies.
I think so.
They're not just reacting to market trends.
Right.
They're actively trying to shake the future of the industry.
Which is cool.
And that forward-thinking mindset could really pay off big time for them down the road.
For them and their investors.
Exactly. I think that's a key takeaway for our listeners.
Yeah.
Occidental is not just another oil and gas company.
They're not.
They're thinking different, acting differently.
Yeah.
And they're disrupting the entire energy sector.
Potentially, yeah.
And they have Warren Buffett's backing.
Which is huge. Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Occidental Petroleum, what's the one thing you want our listener to walk away with?
I would say this. Occidental Petroleum is a company worth watching. Even if you're not ready to invest just yet.
Right.
They're doing some really innovative things. And they have the potential to be a major player in the energy landscape for decades to come.
Wow.
Keep an eye on them.
Keep an eye on them.
Do your own research and see if their story resonates with you.
Yeah, they may not be the flashiest or the most talked about company.
Right.
But they're definitely one to keep on your radar.
Absolutely. They're a company that's quietly making moves.
Building their capabilities.
And
positioning themselves for success.
In a world that's hungry for energy solutions.
And who knows, maybe they'll even become
the next Berkshire Hathaway.
Yeah, with that long track record of
outperforming the market.
Only time will tell. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive.
It is.
We hope you found it insightful.
And maybe even a little bit inspiring. Knowledge is power.
Especially when it comes to investing.
It is. The more you learn,
the better equipped you'll be to navigate this world.
Of investing, yeah.
And make those informed decisions that align with your goals.
Exactly.
And who knows, maybe the next time you're looking at your portfolio,
yeah,
you'll think back to this conversation and decide to take a closer look.
At Occidental Petroleum.
It could be the start of a beautiful,
profitable
relationship.
It could.
That's it for us.
It is.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning,
and keep diving deep.
See you next time.